1865, the Nottingham Forest podcast, is proudly sponsored by The Terrace, the home of retro and fan culture sports merchandising. Check out their range of Forest merch by visiting theterracestore.com or visit them on social media.
The 1865 Match Report.
Hello and welcome to the 1865 Match Report on Boxing Day. We hope you had a very lovely Christmas, and we're here to report on the thing that we knew would happen eventually, but it's still a bitter pill to swallow at times. Forest lost today, 2-0 away at Middlesbrough. Informed Middlesbrough, I think it's fair to say. It was a game in which a goal in each half won it for the home team, one of them being a comical own goal by Ryan Yates, which we will definitely need to dissect. I'm joined by the Maradona of the Midlands. Merry Christmas to you. And it was fair to say the best team won today, wasn't it?
Yep, Forest were pretty much outplayed for the majority of the match. There's maybe a 5-10 minute spell in the second half where we looked like we might get back into it, but apart from that, we were well beaten. Yeah,
so Forest played a 3-4-3 as we kind of expected, to be honest, and we expected that partly because we knew that that's the way that Middlesbrough would play, would be the 3-5-2, the Chris Wilder way. But I think it's fair to say on this occasion that Chris Wilder out-tacticked Steve Cooper, which is obviously something we talked about in our most recent podcast. Now, with this lineup, it meant that Finn Back was playing at right wing back and Jack Colback at left wing back. And Maradona on the Midlands, although it was a relatively even start until the Yates own goal, it was very obvious very early on that Middlesbrough were targeting our fullback areas, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, they're out of the blocks very quickly, and they're attacking down both wings with alarming regularity. There didn't seem to be much protection for our back five, really. There was like no so the usual sort of defensive shield you expect was being sort of bypassed, and they were just getting at us. And also they were pressing really, really high and with a lot of intensity, which I was worried about. I was thinking, well, I mean, I haven't seen a great deal of Forest in the last few weeks for whatever reason. But I thought, well, no, maybe this is what happens now, and we just got to get used to it, and we'll be comfortable. We'll sort it out. But then it just it was the place where we got caught out, I'm afraid, on the first goal.
Well, yeah, and I think you touched upon something really important there. So Middlesbrough were playing frequently between the line of the wing backs and the centre halves. So as you'd imagine, Joe Worrall was having to cover quite a lot for Finn Back in those in the right-hand side for Forest, left-hand side for Middlesbrough, and likewise with McKenna and Colback on the other side. But the thing that was really noticeable is that defensive shield that Yates and Garner were hoping to provide, it was more or less non-existent. And the goal, when it came, well, Hernandez had already threatened against Forest, and he had a really, really strong first half, being recalled to the Middlesbrough team. He was playing nominally as a forward, but he was floating around as you'd expect him to do. And he had a shot which deflected wide quite early on. But then when Samba tried to play the ball out to Ryan Yates, Yates made, 3 errors. So he received the ball about 25 yards out. First problem was his first touch wasn't as good as it should have been, just took his eye off the ball ever so slightly. That meant that we had the second problem where he lost his bearings. And then the third problem is he went to pass it back to Samba in a slight panic, and ended up not looking, passing it in between the posts, which he never do. And of course, Samba was nowhere near it. And it really was symbolic for 2 reasons. Number one, obviously, it's the first goal in a match that was always where the first goal was always going to be important. But then number 2 is it really handed the initiative to Middlesbrough, which they really took for the rest of the half.
Yeah, they really did. They were just first to every second ball. They were sort of winning all the 50-50 challenges. They had a lot more energy. It sort of became a battle when you're sort of playing nominally the same formation as the other team. It's just who's playing better, really, in that case. And they were playing well in every area. On our right-hand side of our defence, Finn Back was having a torrid time. Maybe not unexpected. He was against the experienced Neil Taylor, who it was a bit of a surprise to me to see him playing for Middlesbrough. I missed that one. And Hernandez was bullying him as well. He maybe not so surprising he didn't have the best game, seeing as it's his first start for about 4 months. So that plus his inexperience, plus his physical inferiority compared to Hernandez, really meant he had a really tough time. On the other side, Colback, although he was sort of there, you could see him, he was sort of being bypassed fairly easily. Jones for Middlesbrough, their wing back was brilliant. He was really bombing forward, and it just emphasised how much we were missing Max Lowe and Jed Spence from our lineup. Everything that we've come to expect from them in the Forest side, they were Middlesbrough was showing from their two wing backs, the sort of the constant movement, the non-stop hassling, the bringing the ball forward with energy, connecting the defence to the midfield. We were missing all of that. Our three forward players it was reminiscent of the Chris Hughton days. They just looked so disconnected and so far away from our defence. Midfield was more or less non-existent. Ryan Yates running around a lot, but not doing much. James Garner had like 2 touches the whole game. The game completely passed him by, and Middlesbrough looked like they could score at will, really, in that first half.
And yeah, they had, as you said, they had enough chances to make it 3 or 4-0 at half time. There was a shot that was deflected by Figueiredo, which went just skimmed over the top of the net. Neil Taylor got through, and he had an effort which Samba had to parry. And before that, Andraz Sporar had 2 shots that both required saves by Samba. So one was saved by his legs, and then the other one was a terrific save because he saw it late down to his right, where he got a strong hand to it. And even then, Hernandez was the first man to the ball. So Forest, that was symbolic of how much Forest were on the back foot. And then right at before half time, the one that was probably the closest effort, even if it wasn't the easiest, Taylor put a cross into the corridor of uncertainty, and it looked like it was going all the way through, but Jones came out of nowhere, managed to get a volley onto it, hit the post. So firstly, I wasn't expecting anyone to get a touch on it, and secondly, when he got a touch on it, I was expecting to see the net bulge. So Forest got away with one there, and actually they got away with it on the whole, because the only sight of goal they had also was a great run by Graben down the left-hand side. And then Zinckernagle's first touch was appalling, and it meant that Paddy McNair could intercept, relatively comfortable. So luckily, it was only 1-0 at half-time. And of course, given the run that we've been on, I think that gives Forest fans a glimmer of hope. Now, I was expecting to see the tactical change that we saw at half time. So Tobias Figueiredo was brought off. He had done nothing wrong in the first half. I think it's fair to say he'd actually had a reasonable match as the centre of the back three. But we saw João Carvalho come on, Zinckernagel nominally move over to the left-hand side. Were you surprised by that change at all?
I'm always a little bit surprised when Carvalho comes on, yeah. But I mean, I was expecting some sort of change, but I wasn't really sure what would happen. But so it's always a pleasant surprise, shall we say, when João comes on. It didn't really make that much difference for the first 15 minutes or so of the second half. They were still pretty much all Borough at that stage. João was running around trying to look busy, but not making a great deal of impact. But slowly, Forest got into the half and had pretty much the best chance for about an hour into it, was it? I'm guessing, from memory.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's fair to say that, what the point you've made is important. So Carvalho came on. He did nothing wrong, I have to say. He got a yellow card, deservedly, a little bit later on. But it was the change that was just as important there. And from a defensive point of view, the thing that I noticed was going to a back four meant that Colback and Finback both looked a lot more comfortable playing as orthodox fullbacks against this Middlesbrough team. And then also, particularly on the left-hand side, with Jones and Matt Crooks doubling up on Colback, Jimmy Garner was able to get into the match. He was sitting as the slightly deeper of the two central midfielders, and he was helping out a lot in the left back position. And I think the fact that Garner was a bit more involved there actually helped him as well when it came to getting onto the ball. Now, to the chance that you mentioned, yeah, it was an absolute golden chance. And I'd said earlier in our WhatsApp group chat that Middlesbrough will regret not taking their chances in the first half. And I thought the moment had come, because Brennan Johnson, having been utterly peripheral for most of the match, had his moment. He managed to get past McNair, and McNair had him in his pocket for most of the game. Got past McNair, did exactly the right thing, pulled it back to Zinckernagel, who was near the penalty spots, just slightly closer than that. The pullback was perfect. Zinckernagel was in the right position, and then he just leant back and managed to sky it from about 10 yards. And that really was an appalling miss, wasn't it, Maradona the Midlands?
It was. It just needed a simple sort of side foot into the corner, and would have changed the game when it would have made it 1-1.
And symptomatic of the match that Zinckernagel was having.
Symptomatic. We both said it at the same time there. Oh,
well, there you go. Yeah,
it's symptomatic of the game as Zinckernagel was having. So not a nothing game really. Not adding much. First touch was poor throughout.
Yeah.
And he got hauled off. Not long after.
And Cooper being Cooper, I'd imagine that was a change that he would have made anyway, because Xande Silva came on, forgotten man Xande Silva, and he played much more as an orthodox winger. So I think for the balance of having that 4-2-3-1, I can understand why that was a good move to make. Forest then had another really good chance, and I would have loved it if this one had gone in, because Joe Worrall made a foray forward. And Worrall actually had a pretty good match on the whole, I think. Then he made a foray forward from about 25 yards out. He played it out to the right flank to Brennan Johnson. Johnson managed to get the cross in, and Worrall had continued his run, and he got a header, and it just looped over the bar and onto the roof of the net. And that's exactly the kind of goal that I love when defenders score. They continue their run and do that. It reminds me of watching Colin Cooper in the 90s, but it wasn't to be. And let's be honest, I think that was where the match came and went, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. It was very unlucky. It was a tremendous run, and it just stretching for the header. He could have maybe looped into the far corner, but it didn't. But then the Middlesbrough pretty much straight away went down the other end. They got down the Forest left hand side. Samba made a reasonable save from the first effort, but it went straight into the danger zone in the penalty box, and Sporar was there to tidy it up, and that was pretty much game over there.
And you know what? There'll be some people who'll be critical of Sporar. Some people will be critical of Samba because Sporar was able to sweep it home, but actually, I think the real problem was that. In that kind of left back position, again, where Garner and Colback were trying to team up to stop Crooks and Jones, they were just that yard or so behind. So really, it should have been blocked at source. And Samba, could he have done better? I'm ambivalent about that. If it'd been the other way around and Forest were attacking it as Johnson putting the ball in and Graben sweeping home the rebound, then we wouldn't be talking about the opposition defending. We'd just be delighted at the goal that we've scored, I think. And after that, I mean, it was game over, wasn't it? And Borough were dominant, weren't they?
They were. There was some. I mean, what really stuck out for me was how many bodies they got forward throughout the game, and how many players they were getting into the box. It did remind me a little bit of sort of the way Forest been playing in recent months at their best. And and you have to give them credit. They played well today, and they look like a real threat for the playoffs. They've got a slightly stronger squad than you'd imagine, sort of not paying them much attention from sort of being from a Forest perspective, but then sort of to bring in people like Taylor and some of the players they brought off the bench like Watmore. They've got a fairly decent, strong squad, and it might be strengthening it a bit more in January with the return of Jed Spence. So yeah, it's
I've heard his rubbish show.
Yeah.
It's also worth pointing out that I don't see how Spence would fit into that team, because Jones was absolutely terrific, and from what we've heard, he's probably rivaling Spence for the best right wing back in the division at the moment. They've also got Dijksteel, whose natural position is as a right back or a right wing back. And Dijksteel's currently playing in the back three along with Dale Fry and Paddy McNair. So, if Spence goes back, he's not really going to want to go back, is he? Because there's not going to be much game time for him there. I think it's also worth pointing out that, everyone talks about Wilder as being, oh yes, going to play with a back three and wing backs. But the other thing that was very much a hallmark of a Chris Wilder team today was the physicality. And by that, I don't mean they were brutal. I mean that Middlesbrough were just relentless. And every single time Forest had the ball, they'd always have a Middlesbrough player harrying them and hassling them. There wasn't a single occasion when a Forest player could relax on the ball, was there?
That is absolutely right. It started right on our defensive line. They were sort of on them all throughout the game, and that really set the tempo. They sort of obviously sort of spotted that maybe we're not as comfortable on the ball as some other teams are when playing out, and it's still fairly new to us. So that did hurt us in the first half, especially. A special mention, I think, for Silva, who came on for Forest. He looked quite good. As you'd say, the forgotten man. I'd completely forgotten he was at the club. So for him to come on and do that was.
And he hit the post with 2 minutes to go, didn't he? Yeah, and he did everything right there. That was an occasion where, a rare occasion where Colback had some space down the left-hand side after some good work by Garner and Silva. And Silva had pulled onto the edge of the box, and he did everything absolutely right in terms of his technique. He's put his side foot through it. It's just one of those where on another day that hits the inside of the post and it looks like an absolutely brilliant finish. On this occasion, it just hit the kind of face of the post and bounced away. But yeah, he showed good energy. He showed that he's got some ability. Whether that's something that's going to stand him in good stead. We heard from Steve Cooper after the match that Joe Lolley's currently injured. Obviously, we're a bit thin when it comes to bodies, aren't we, at the moment? So transfer window notwithstanding, we're probably going to need the likes of Carvalho and Silva to be present and to be available, aren't we?
Yeah, and the game sort of come thick and fast. There's maybe a bit of an argument that the quality drops off after our first 11 or 12 players. I'm not sure people have been saying we need to sign another central defender, but I think we've still got Eli Rodrigo at the club, and
but
I don't know how
he's struggling. He's struggling to get fit, isn't he?
Yeah. So I mean, I think any centre back you bring in now will struggle for game time to get past Worrall, McKenna, and Biggerida. So they're going to have the same sort of problem, sort of bringing in somebody who won't play that often into the hurly-burly of a championship match. It's the fullback areas that they've been the basis on which we've created our run this season under Steve Cooper, and that's where it's going to sort of make or break us. I think if we can by some hook or crook keep Jed Spence and Max Lowe, everything's looking rosy again. If we can't, we're struggling. We're sort of scratching around looking for some more players. I don't know what's happened to, was it Jagger who came from Olympiacos?
Oh, Drager. Yeah.
Drager,
so
sorry.
the trouble with him is that he's going to be off for the African Cup of Nations with Tunisia. which apparently is one of the reasons why he wasn't available today. I don't know if he'd have been picked ahead of Finn back anyway. Max Lowe's injury might well save his season with Forest in the sense of it makes it less likely he'll be recalled. There's some talk about Forest reigniting an interest in Lee Buchanan if Derby need to do a fire sale, which it looks increasingly likely that they will. Right back, I mean, Finn back, another word for him really, because you said that he had a torrid time in that first half. He didn't do a huge amount wrong. It was just that lack of experience and physicality, wasn't it? So in that sense, if Forest can integrate him slowly into the first team picture during the course of the season, then that will stand him in good stead for the future, though, won't it?
It will, yeah. I think just the problem he's had is sort of coming up against two really experienced physical players today, and the lack of game time in the last few months. It's hard to just come into a team like that. But yeah, I mean, if we can give him sort of a bit of experience here and there, that's all going to keep holding in good stead. But he's very young yet, so time's on his side.
Just as a footnote, let's talk about Steve Cooper, who we've mentioned in the last big podcast that Cooper always knows the right thing to say, and today he pulled no punches and he said, Forest weren't good, we were second best, we weren't up to the level of performance that we need. He didn't apportion any blame in terms of players, other than mentioning that Phil was disappointed with that miss in the first half because it would have been a different game. So he's not shirked his responsibilities there. Due to Borough winning against us today and Huddersfield winning against Blackpool, it means that Forest drop 2 places in the table. Now in 9th position with 34 points, but obviously due to COVID cancellations, there's other teams around us who've got games in hand. Would have been nice to put a bit of daylight there, but that's the way it goes. And then we wait and see sort of what happens. We've got the next match, which is against Huddersfield, I believe, which is coming up in just a couple of days' time, 3 or 4 days' time. So that will be a good opportunity to try and get to the show back on the road. Although with a thin squad, Forest are really going to have to pull out all the stops. So we say thank you to the Maradona the Midlands for joining us today. We say commiserations to Forest, the players and the manager. And we also say thank you to you, listener, for joining us again today. And we'll be back soon.